You've probably been taught that power always follows technology, that the most advanced civilizations always win, that history is shaped by those who dominate with superior weapons, superior strategy, and superior organization. But what if that idea is incomplete? What if there was a moment in history that quietly proved something else entirely? Today, you're going to understand not just a battle, but a lesson about power, preparation, and perception. This is the story of how an African empire rewrote expectations, and why that lesson still matters today. Let's begin with a question. What really makes a nation strong? Is it weapons? Is it numbers? Or is it something deeper, something less visible? To understand this, you need to go back to a time when the world was being reshaped by ambition. During the late 19th century, global powers were expanding beyond their borders, driven by competition, pride, and the belief that they had the right to dominate others. This period would later be called the Age of Empire, and across Africa, territories were being claimed rapidly. But one region stood apart, high above sea level, protected by mountains and history. A civilization had developed its own systems, its own identity, and its own understanding of survival. This was not a passive society waiting to be conquered. It was a state that had observed the world carefully. And more importantly, it had learned. Now, pause and think about this. Most people assume that resistance happens when a threat arrives. But the most effective resistance begins long before the threat becomes visible. Preparation is invisible, and that is exactly what was happening. Leadership understood something critical. You do not wait for danger to prepare. You prepare so thoroughly that when danger comes, it finds you ready. So changes began, not loudly, not dramatically, but strategically. Weapons were acquired. Alliances were built. Communication across regions improved, and perhaps most importantly, unity was reinforced. Because without unity, strength collapses from within. Now here is where many people misunderstand history. They assume that conflict is always sudden, but in reality, conflict builds slowly. Tension grows. Misunderstandings develop. Ambition pushes boundaries, and eventually something breaks. In this case, that breaking point came through words, not weapons. A document, an agreement, a treaty. On the surface, it appeared to be simple diplomacy, but beneath the surface, it carried two completely different meanings. One version preserved independence, the other implied submission, and when that contradiction was discovered, everything changed. Let's pause again. This is a powerful lesson. Sometimes the most dangerous threats are not visible. They are written, they are disguised, and they rely on you not noticing the difference. When the truth became clear, the response was immediate. Not panic, not confusion, but decision. The kind of decision that defines leadership. There would be no quiet acceptance. There would be no gradual surrender. There would be preparation. Messages were sent across the land, not just as orders, but as a call to defend something larger than territory, a call to defend identity. And something remarkable happened. People responded, not because they were forced, but because they understood what was at stake. Now, think about this carefully. What makes people unite? Fear? Sometimes. But stronger than fear is purpose. When people believe in what they are protecting, their strength multiplies. As forces gathered, something else became clear. This was not going to be a simple confrontation. The opposing side believed they had already won. They had confidence. They had experience. They had the belief that victory was inevitable. And that belief would become their weakness. Because overconfidence creates blindness. It makes you underestimate. It makes you ignore. It makes you walk forward without questioning. Now imagine the setting. Haute terrain, high elevations, unfamiliar conditions, and an opponent who understands every inch of the land. This is not just geography. This is strategy. When the moment finally came, it did not unfold the way many expected. Instead of a quick advance, resistance met preparation. Instead of confusion, there was coordination. Instead of collapse, there was control. And this is the turning point, because history often changes not when strength appears, but when assumptions fail. The confrontation became intense, but something was different. The side that expected victory began to lose structure. Communication weakened. Formation broke. Confidence turned into uncertainty. And once uncertainty enters a system, everything changes. Decisions slow down. Mistakes increase. Momentum shifts. Meanwhile, the opposing force gained energy. Because success, even small success, builds belief. And belief fuels action. What followed was not just a physical struggle. It was psychological. One side realizing they were not in control. The other realizing they were stronger than expected. And then, something rare happened. The expected outcome collapsed. Now stop here, because this moment matters. This is where history teaches something powerful. Victory is not always about being stronger. Sometimes it is about being better prepared for reality. When the confrontation ended, the impact was immediate. The world took notice, because something unexpected had occurred. An assumption had been broken. And when assumptions break, they change how people think. Now let's step back and understand the bigger picture. Why does this story matter? Not just as history, but as a lesson. Lesson 1. Preparation is power. Not visible power, not loud power, but quiet, strategic power. Lesson 2. Unity multiplies strength. Without unity, even the strongest systems collapse. Lesson 3. Never underestimate based on perception, because perception is often incomplete. Lesson 4. Overconfidence is dangerous. It removes awareness, and awareness is essential for survival. Lesson 5. History is not just about what happened. It is about what can be learned. Because the truth is, this story is not just about the past. It is about patterns. Patterns that repeat in different forms. Even today, the same principles apply. Preparation, unity, awareness, strategy. And here is the final thought. The most powerful victories are not just those that win battles. They are the ones that change how the world sees you. Because once perception changes, everything changes. And that is how history moves forward. Not just through force, but through moments that redefine expectation.